Kayla, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's awesome that you've been able to do this. It's really, really nice to not only speak to a female, but a lifter and someone that lives and breathes this just as much as everyone else that we have on the podcast. So thank you for coming on board.
Thanks for having me.
It's really interesting because I love speaking to people that get to have very different views and opinions on kind of the multifaceted strength industry and training industry, and obviously you get to come at it from various different angles of not only training yourself but all of your work that you've done in the physio world, all of the sports science stuff that obviously gives you this huge breadth of information and tools to utilize with your clients to help them progress. But what I'm really, really, really interested in is getting into the nitty-gritty of what females need to be doing in their training. It's kind of a hot topic that we're talking more about now, but understanding that females and males don't operate the same, and that's fine. Our genetic makeup and structure is different, our anatomical structure is different, and learning how to utilize what we have to the best of our ability. So what do we think first and foremost is the most important thing we need to be looking at and assessing in female clients compared to male clients?
Well, I think the biggest thing physiologically and most obviously is the difference in hormones between males and females. And this can affect things from programming. It can affect the way you sort of structure your training. It can also affect, like, the anatomy side can affect execution. We sort of look at females as being like smaller males. That's not necessarily true. There are, so many differences between males and females, and the way they should be trained. There's so many differences I could make. I could list them all now.
That's like an hour podcast just in and of itself of all the differentiating factors. The whole
hour is going to be about.
So obviously it's really. No, sorry, crack on.
No, you go.
It's obviously it's really interesting because of course there are so many big, huge differentiating factors, but yet when we look at kind of general training, general pop training, things that we see online, we really aren't seeing kind of like this is what we need to be looking at for the female lifter, for someone who is a beginner, and this is what we need to be looking for males. It's just kind of everyone's kind of using the same kind of structure for everything, which obviously to an extent is going to get people a certain way there. But then when we really start to get into the nitty gritty, like I know obviously you guys love to talk about like the anatomical structure of like the hip joint. In terms of like squatting, obviously a female is going to have a different hip structure to a male in terms of their depth, in terms of how far they can drive their knees out, what's comfortable for them is going to be very, very different. So when you are a beginner lifter, you're a female and you're coming into the gym, what are some of the things that you can be doing to preemptively help you to work with your body in not only necessarily a safer environment, but an environment where you can utilize your anatomical structure better?
Yeah, well, I think we're quite well adapted to sort of new beginner sort of stage where we're wanting to program higher frequency, higher volume for beginner lifter, but also females, due to their hormones like the estrogen makeup and things like that, we can actually have higher volume, higher frequency training, as well as, we have the right muscle fiber type, all of that as well. So in that regard, we're quite well adapted for that new beginner. Sort of progress into more of that intermediate, advanced, and you're sort of looking at intensity, women are still able to, and this has been shown in studies, still able to work at higher intensities for a higher volume, for example. So be able to work at, say, 85% of their 1RM for 3 reps, whereas a male might only be able to do 2 reps of that sort of that intensity at that same intensity sort of, and that's because of the way that our muscle fiber distribution is made up, and the estrogen, like the levels of estrogen that we have in our, like physiologically as well. So when I'm looking at sort of hip structure and also, you know, upper body muscle mass distribution and carrying angle of the elbow and things like that, it's just, there are a few cues that I will use for beginner lifters. A common cue that's heard for squats, for example, would be knees out. And because we have this cue angle, so this angle where our femur has an inward trajectory towards the knee because of our wider hip structure, our knees sort of like anatomically normally sit in a little bit. So when a woman is told knees out as a cue, like yelling knees out, this could actually be too far out for her. And then what's happening is the forces in the knee are traveling more sort of in towards that medial meniscus, and it's putting sort of undue forces and stress through the knee if you're sort of going knees out all the time. So actually knees not in might be a better cue, whereas with that anatomical structure, that is just maybe not an appropriate cue for a woman because they're thinking like push them out, whereas they already normally in a little bit, and that's what used to, you know, walking around day to day.
Yeah, I think it's also a thing of the kind of generally we see in the gym environment, you know, lots of these huge, big, jacked up, muscly dudes who have, you know, usually very poor range of motion. They're not the most mobile creatures on the planet, but females tend to always carry kind of generally a little bit more of mobility. So this kind of over cueing of knees out, like, you know, you've got the flexibility, you can do this, you can reach this range of motion. So this overemphasis on this cue that really isn't actually doing anything but just kind of creating more confusion for the client because they're going, why can't I get this? Why is this cue not working for me? But then also it then confusing the movement pattern for them, and then kind of not necessarily enjoying it quite as much because they haven't got it, because you as a coach are actually cueing something that isn't going to be beneficial. So I think it's really interesting that you bring up this point that, okay, it's not necessarily knees out, it's just not knees in. I think that's a brilliant way to think about it.
Yeah, I think really helps people, especially like when you're learning a new skill. Like, it's frustrating. Like, it's like, why can't I get this? Why can't I get this? And then if you're cueing the same thing over and over and over, and someone's not getting it, you need a different cue. Like, otherwise, it's just crazy. Like, well, knocking your head up against a brick wall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. It's you're busting your head against the brick wall, but then also the client is just getting progressively more frustrated at the fact that they're not getting any further through with their progression. So it's really interesting that you kind of talk about that. So obviously training with females over males, well, training in general, obviously we have so many different variables that we have to take into consideration on a daily basis. And then the thing I find fascinating is that you take all of those variables and then you look at a female and you go, okay, well, not only do we have all of these things that we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but then every single month our entire body just wants to completely jeopardize everything we've worked towards and throw every single one of our hormones as far out of whack as possible just to really test us.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated to talk to you about how do you think that you can best utilize your period and training around your period? Because of course it's something that you can't get away from. It's something that is going to have tremendous physiological effects on your body month in, month out. Obviously, you knowing about it is helpful, but how are you trying to balance training and getting the most out of yourself or your clients, and then balancing the expectations with obviously everything else that's happening?
So it's because we are able to reproduce, whereas the males can't reproduce. But I think women sort of see it as like a negative thing, and they sort of, find it frustrating and just annoying, like going through this cycle every month. But there are huge benefits to it as well, that also contribute to our training. And just becoming more aware and knowing of are in your cycle can have major implications on your training. Because if you're not progressing, it's not about progressing week to week. It's sort of about progressing from, say, like week one of one block to week one of another block, because that's where the hormones are going to be sort of at similar levels each month, rather than, say, comparing week 1 to week 3 in a training block where you might be holding more water weight and then you think you haven't lost weight even though you've been in a calorie deficit, and it just sort of throws off your perception of progress, and you sort of get a bit demoralized. But we need to understand that, like, our body is going through this process, and we need to sort of be a bit more understanding and also like empathetic towards ourselves if we're not hitting those weights in a certain week. So first of all, there are two main phases, but it's sort of broken up into 4, I guess, stages of the cycle. So we have our follicular phase, is sort of like the first phase. This is where sort of menstruation and bleeding sort of is finishing. And that's obviously when like the uterine lining is shedding and we're bleeding, and all the hormones are quite low at this time. So we can sort of feel a little bit tired and sluggish and not really performing our best. But then when we go into the follicular phase, when the egg is being released from the ovary, the estrogen starts to rise, and a hormone called FSH starts to rise, and this sort of gives us a little bit more energy. So as we go through that follicular phase, everything's rising, sort of feeling good, feeling energetic, and it peaks sort of around ovulation, and that's when that egg is released from the ovary. So the first sort of 2 weeks is a good time to sort of go harder with your intensity in training, up the volume and intensity, and sort of ride the high of that wave where we're feeling good. After a few days after ovulation, that's when estrogen sort of starts to take a dip, and we sort of start feeling a little bit more. We go into what's called the luteal phase, and that's when energy, performance and things like that start to take a little bit of a dip. But also during this phase, progesterone rises. So this causes an increase in metabolic rate and an increase in core body temperature. So we might not be able to use the volume and intensity just due to, increased cardiovascular strain and things like that. So this is a time where sort of I would program for my client more of like sort of deload week during that time, and probably not the best time to diet a client either, because due to that sort of high metabolic rate, we have increased cravings and things like that. So I would sort of stick to more of that dieting phase more towards the first 2 weeks, because if you're putting them on super low calories and they're just hungry all the time, they're just gonna they're going to go and binge maybe if they don't have that sort of self-control. So, that's basically a quick rundown of the cycle and how I would program around that time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So are you working with your clients are you kind of looking at 4-week mini cycles? Obviously, you're gonna have your macro cycle, and understand what you're looking for in the grand scheme of things with their progress. And then are you taking that general progress and breaking it down into monthly blocks and saying, okay, well, these first 2 weeks, this is where we're going to be increasing our percentiles, or we're going to be working, maybe 1 point up higher on the RPE, or whatever, platform you like to use to work on how hard your clients are working. Then just slowly taper it off for the rest of the 2 weeks, and then look to increase when you come back in the next 2 weeks. How are you programming that?
It really depends on the client. So you sort of have to, it might not be something you broach straight away, but it might be something that you recognize patterns over time with them. because some females don't really experience many symptoms. So if they're feeling good through that luteal phase, then they can still work hard because there's actually a decreased risk of injury during that time as well, like, because of what the hormones are doing around. Like there is a high risk of injury during that follicular phase when the ligaments are becoming a bit more lax and things like that. So it really depends on the client. So, and it also depends on their training age. It also depends how heavy they are lifting. If they're more of a beginner and I'm programming sort of like a higher volume, lower intensity, then maybe it won't affect them so much. But if they're sort of lifting heavier weights and more sort of towards their 1 rep max, then maybe we'll take like a deload week during that second phase.
Now, obviously, you spoke about earlier
So yeah,
on that you know, in terms of training frequency and volume and stuff, that you're going to be opting with everything female wise a lot more lower body based, in terms of, because you're able to recruit a lot more. There tends to be this drift towards females wanting to train lower body anyway because they're genetically predisposed to be able to utilize that load better. Do you feel that this is kind of this being that kind of that 2 week kind of deload, just to clarify that this is a case where you would maybe reduce more of the upper body stuff that is going to have a greater impact as opposed to the lower body stuff, or are you pulling everything back?
Again, I would say it probably depends on the client. So if they are sort of like at that higher training age and they are more like of a strength athlete, let's say, and they're working at higher percentages of their 1 rep max, then perhaps they still keep that intensity high, but they're just cutting their volume in half. And perhaps if they are having a deload week, maybe we just do an APE exercise rather than like all the supplementary and accessory exercises as well, just so they are having that rest, but they're still sort of keeping that like that system high, because like no system really works in isolation. So yes, there's like the hormones we need to factor in, but there's also like the neurological system and like how they're feeling physically and how their muscles are recovering, all those sorts of things we sort of need to take into account. So yeah, perhaps we would take away some of the volume of their supplementary exercises. Females tend to have sort of more androgen receptors in their lower body, so they can take a bit more volume in their lower body, and then muscle mass and things like that on their body they can take away. And stress is an aggregate as well, so it's looking at their daily lifestyle and what they're doing day to day, whether they have a stressful job or they haven't slept, or they're in a calorie deficit. All these things we need to take into account when programming. So the hormones just sort of layers in an extra thing at the top, but there are all these lifestyle factors as well.
Yeah, but it's like I was saying in the beginning, isn't it? Like there's so many different factors. There's just so many. Like
it's a science and an art.
Yeah, and then of course you have not only all of those factors. Then obviously when you have all of these hormones come into play as a female, it obviously then messes massively with you mentally. So not only are you trying to deal and juggle with all these stresses, but then you've got, it almost feels like your body that's kind of going against everything that you want it to, which I'm sure can be really, really frustrating at times.
You could have the most elaborate program laid out, and then I don't know, their dog gets run over or something, and it's like, well, that day's out or that week's out, and like I had a bad day at work, or someone brought cake into the office, and like everything just gets blown. So like it's having that structure, yes, but also realizing that people aren't just robots. Like human beings have emotions, and just being empathetic to that as well. Like if a client comes to me and they're like, oh well, like I fucked this up like this day and this day. It's just like, okay, well, like, let's recognize like what happened, and then, let's work on things that we can do for next time in case this happens, have strategies in place. But also, like, I'm not like gonna go, well, you fucked up. Like, you need to
How
have that
dare you
empathy,
eat that
because
cake?
like you do it
Give
too.
me 10 press-ups now.
I'm not perfect. Yeah, right. No, I think
Yeah.
those are really like old school days, like those days ago.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there are still a few of them around out there for sure in the
Yeah,
deep dark alley gyms. So it's really interesting, coming into this with all of these different factors, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily, especially Gen Pop, people that are just getting into training for the first time. I should go out and state, because I haven't spoken about Gen Pop. Gen Pop being just general population, the vast majority of just general people out there that are training, getting into training. So if you don't know about all of these different stress factors and variables that are in day to day, in your training cycle, in your program, in your life, that it can be very, very overwhelming, because you can feel that you're doing all the things right, you're doing the sessions, you're getting in there, you're trying to be consistent, but things just aren't going right. So I think having that bigger, greater understanding, and it brings me to my next point, is how much do you focus your emphasis on educating the female client about what they should expect around training around their period, what they should expect out of their body, and how they can kind of utilize these things to their advantage?
Yeah, well, that's huge. Like, education's kind of like my wheelhouse. Like, I don't think I could be a trainer without educating, because as a physio as well, not just a trainer, like I always in clinic, if I was treating someone hands on, my next like step would always be to give them like corrective exercise, or some sort of tip that they can go away with, to help themselves, because I think empowering people is the most important thing, and it actually helps them get better as well. Like, when they know what's going on, it's sort of like, oh, okay, like it's more that awareness, I think. Like, it's not a very good business model, because people get better and then they go and they're on their way, but it's like, it's what I stand for, because I'd rather that, like, I'd rather people know me for that than coming to me and then giving them, say, like a low calorie diet and high intensity exercise, where they're going to lose a lot of weight really quickly, but it's like, it's not sustainable in the long run, and it's also not educating them, and yes, they'll get results quickly, but it's not going to last long term. So I'd rather give someone like long lasting results, for the long term, and then so if anything were to happen again, were to injure themselves, they know what to do, or they come to me for advice, and they know I'm going to give them proper advice that's going to that they can do themselves as well. And here we are, like, 2020, what is it, April 2020, we're all stuck in isolation, and we're having to do all these like virtual calls and things like that, which hopefully, like, obviously it's not going to last forever, but during time people can't go and see practitioners, so it's giving them the tools to actually be able to help themselves and fix that. Like, if it's an injury, fix themselves, and if it's training or nutrition or diet, it can be really frustrating when you don't know what works, because for example, if someone was to do a keto diet, they're like, oh, like keto's like, it's a calorie deficit, like keto's amazing, or like high carbs amazing, but it's just all like a calorie deficit. And once you know that sort of base level, it kind of makes your job a lot easier as well, because you don't have to repeat yourself so many times. Yeah, so education is massive, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with every single point that you said there. I think you hit the nail on the freaking head, and I think it's really interesting. So I work as a sports massage therapist, as well as being a trainer and a coach. and I've always found it fascinating. I work in a physiotherapy clinic. I get to work with literally some of the best sports physios in the UK, so I'm very, very blessed that I get to be around these people on a day-to-day basis. But, and I mean, I know that I'll say this to you, and I pretty much know 100% that you'll agree with it. But as a practitioner, as a therapist, when you give a client a treatment, they get something out of it. But then when you take those extra 2 or 3 minutes and you go, okay, these are the things that I want you to work on. These are the things that I want you to develop. And then the next time that you see them, they come back in and they go, hey, you know those exercises that you gave me? Oh my God, they've been amazing. Like, I haven't had any more shoulder pain, or I've finally been able to squat again, or I can actually get out of bed without any pain. And as someone that's actually given them that advice, there is no greater feeling in the world than knowing that you just doing that extra little bit more than you had to. Like, you'd already been paid. It didn't matter. You could have shut your mouth and nothing would have changed. But the fact that you've then gone above and beyond that, and someone's got something out of that, it's such a good little kick and feeling inside for yourself that, like, I think it's really, really important that we should be doing more of that.
Yeah, and you know, like if say their partner or their mother or family member or something like that has an issue, they're going to send them to you because, you know, you helped them. It pays back in the long run just to do the right thing and, you know, help people in the right way rather than sort of misleading or just giving them a quick fix. Like, there's no such thing as a quick fix.
Yeah, yes.
And once
yes,
they're sort of...
Yes, there is no such thing. I'm so glad you said that. Thank fuck.
And once they're sort of invested, like, you know, they're invested in their health as well. So it makes your job easier because it's not like, that hitting your head up against the brick wall either. It's like, thank you so much. And it makes you feel really good. It makes it all worth it.
But you know, obviously you're going to have those clients sometimes where maybe, you know, they are Gen Pop and they're not that interested in how their body works or whatever. But then on the flip side, you know, I've had clients before that have come into the gym, they've known nothing. And I'm very much like you that I say the exact same thing. I say it's the worst business model in the world because what I want to do is teach you and train you everything I can possibly know now, so then you can go along and you've now got the foundation for the rest of your life ahead of you. And then I can rest happy because I know that that's what I would have wanted when I was younger. So educating my clients, I think, is really important. And when you come across a client that feeds off of that education and you can see that light bulb and you go, okay, well, actually, this is what's happening at this joint structure. This is what we're trying to cue for. And they go, oh, right. And then they try the movement again and you can just see it in their eyes that they get it. And everything clicks into place and you're like... This is why we do it, because now they're trying to actively understand why they're doing these things. And I think it's so important that we have people like you out in the world that is pushing hard on this educational stuff, because there's 1,000,001 different fucking Instagram accounts out there and 1,000,001 different corrective exercises. You know, you can pretty much get a master's degree in any chosen field via the internet, but finding the correct information and finding the correct way to utilize it, I think, is still very, very rare. And that's what I love about your profile, and that's what I love about what you guys are doing, is that you have this huge emphasis not only on education, but educating to a very high degree and letting everyone understand why they actually need to be doing these things, rather than just being like, you got weak ass glutes, go and do 4 sets of 20 banded clamshells and just kind of leaving them to it and then wondering why their glute development doesn't get any better. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, as well. And the best way to learn yourself is to teach other people. That's what I find as well. If I find a new piece of it, like, I'm updating my knowledge all the time. Like, I'm not treating the same way I treated 5 years ago. Like, someone taught me a way to treat, and then, you know, I sort of went along with that, and I sort of questioned little things out of that, and then I was able to sort of become the practitioner I am today. So just always questioning, and then, you know, when I learn something new, we'll try it, and we'll update our information as we go along as well. I think it's the best way to learn.
that's brilliant, because personal experience gives you so much more, but it's going back into this like ever feeding loop that kind of you going through that experience gives you an understanding, but it also gives you empathy. It gives you the understanding of the movement patterns, so you can then educate and refeed that. But then because you have that empathy, you then understand what that feels like. So then when you're reciprocating that with clientele, you have a greater connection with them to be like, hey, like, I know that this sucks, or I know that your ROM here might not be as good, so this is going to be a bit harder. So then you can let them know. And I think it's little things like that that just become so massively underestimated in this industry, that little bit of, hey, like, I know this maybe is going to be a little bit harder, so let's try this, let's do that. That is the thing that's going to keep those clients coming back week in, week out, that are going to want them to come to you because they feel comfortable that you understand them and how their body works. And I think that's a huge point.
Yeah, yeah. And it does get frustrating when you see some things out there, but you sort of try to understand like that's what they were taught as well. Like this might be something that we were taught at university, for example, but like that's outdated now, and we need to sort of update the software and keep expanding on what we know and how the body works, and just, yeah, taking into account all those things as well as the person in front of you, not just, you're not going to give one person the same exercises as another person, or they're not going to train the same way. And like we talked about before with body structure and anatomy and physiology and things like that, we work with individuals and don't just sort of hand out a recipe to like everyone. Like there's not one size sort of fits all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think for males, training and coaching males, that's one thing. Males training and coaching females is another thing, and vice versa with females and females and females and males, because of course we go back to that giant empathetic scale of where do we sit at. So do you feel that, kind of, obviously being a male coach, I really tried to put an understanding and an emphasis behind every single session, taking on board everything that my client is saying in the warm-up, really listening to them for the first 5 to 10 minutes, seeing how they're feeling, seeing how their day is, and in my mind trying to go through all those stresses, factors, and contributing things that are going to kind of tell me, okay, are we going to get something out of this session? Like, are we going to be pushing up to an 8 or a 9 on the RPE? Or is this more of a high volume, low load kind of day? Do you think that males coaching females need to start having a greater empathetic factor into their training on what they should be expecting to get out of sessions around their cycle? Or do you think that, maybe this is something that we're being a little bit too kind of like flouncy pouncy about, and we just need to shut the fuck up and get stuck in with it? Because I understand there is sometimes this like paralysis by overanalysis as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, there's the whole, I guess, debate of like people sort of staying in their lane, like males, if they haven't been through that, can they really talk about that with their female clients? Look, I had this discussion with someone as well. They reached out on Instagram, and they asked me about this, and I think males, I think it's great for them to be aware about, all these sort of factors. Obviously, things like anatomy, that doesn't matter. They can always change up the cues and things like that for females. In terms of like the physiology and the side of the thing, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a conversation males bring up with a female. A female might not feel, if she's that type of female, I mean, it's all about, we're in the people business. Like, it's all about like talking to people. So if you feel that your client is open and they're happy to talk about that, then great. If they're not, maybe they're a little bit more reserved, and you don't think that might be a conversation you want to open up, then like I said before, just asking them how they feel is great. You don't necessarily have to be like, where in your cycle are you? You don't have to be like that direct, but just asking
Show
them.
me on the calendar. Where are we?
Yeah, right. And a lot of females don't know either. Like, they don't, they're sort of like unaware, like even if it doesn't affect them that much, they might not be aware of aware of what's actually happening in their body, or they might not track it. For example, they might have irregular periods, like some might have like a longer cycle, because it can be between, like normal is anywhere between 28 and 35 days, but you might have, for example, a young female and she may have an eating disorder and she might not even get her period. So all the hormones might be low all the time. So amenorrhea is quite common, also PCOS, like things like that. So going back to my original thing, for a male talking to a female, I would just sort of ask their feeling for that week and get an understanding, like week to week in each block. And you might start being able to see patterns and piecing things together there. And then that's when you can sort of start to be like, you know, recognize patterns and program that way, and be a bit more sort of, I guess, sensitive and like smart that way, rather than just blurting it out there.
Yeah, I love what you said there, where you said that, you know, we're in the people business, and it's so true that I think if a lot of coaches took the time to take a step back and actually take a few minutes to actually focus on the client, actually listen to them, actually pay attention to them, actually learn about them, actually learn about, you know, how they feel from day to day, what things at work piss them off. These little things that, you know, you might think are nothing, are just kind of mindless chit chat throughout a session. These are all cue factors that when that client then next comes in, they go, oh man, Jennifer was really pissing me off today at work. And you go, okay, I know you hate Jennifer. I know she stresses you out. I know maybe that we need to be focusing more on this today than that. But if you don't know and you don't take the time to know that person, that's just a throwaway statement. But actually, you can gain so much knowledge from just these little things that your clients are telling you. So I think you've put it so beautifully there that, you know, we're in the people business. If you actually care about people and you actually listen to people as a coach, that's going to give you a much bigger head start in terms of getting and eking the most out of your clients.
Yeah, and you might come and Jennifer's been pissing her off that day, but maybe she doesn't need like a lesser session. Maybe she doesn't need the intensity and the volume to be brought back. Maybe she just needs to get on a hack squat and like smash it out. Just she's in a hack squat or a leg press, say, rather than a back squat or a front squat or something like that. Just take that that, you know, that stability instrument away, and then just chuck them on something else and let them go for it if that's what they need during that day. You know, you can sort of judge that in the warm up and you know, see how that session's going to run, but they can still get the most out of it. Like, yeah, it's not just a rolling around, you know, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there have been times where I've been warming up with a client, we've been getting ready to kind of go into our first movement, deadlift, squat, whatever it might be. And, you know, I'm going, oh, okay, so they're really heavy on their period. They're really not having a good time. They're really stressed out. And we get into the movement, and I think, you know, okay, maybe we're going to take it a little bit easier today. And they start progressing through it, and actually form looks really tasty. Everything's moving well. And we just keep on going, keep on asking them, you know, how are you feeling? Yeah, it feels good. Body feels good. Everything's working. It's like, okay, well, this is going against everything that I think, because in theory, I should maybe be being a little bit easier with it. Fuck, I've had some sessions where females have come in and said that they've just been feeling the worst they've ever felt, and then they've added like 20 kilos onto their deadlift PB, and I'm like, okay, right, this goes against everything I thought to be true. So it's so important, like you said, like you have to understand the individual.
Yeah, and you need, as a coach, you need to be ready and you need to be adaptable. You have all the tools in the tool belt and you understand, but at the end of the day, it's about the client.
Yeah, and I think when you're in the business to help the client out, against, you know, monetary gain or social influence, that's when, you know, that's when the money comes, that's when the respect comes, that's when the progression from all of your clients comes, because everyone understands that you're in it because you love it and you're passionate about it, and it's not all of these extrinsic factors that are kind of that are bringing you here. So I think it's beautiful, and I mean, you can hear when you talk about it that you are someone who's very much, you're in the business for the person. You're not like in the business for like the how sexy the business has now become. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was playing sports since I could walk really, and then I was in the gym from 15, 16 whenever I was allowed to get in the gym. So it's pretty much my life, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else right now.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's a great time to be alive. Obviously, in terms of where we are with social media, we have the option now to kind of go against, you know, all of the incorrective practices that are being put out, all the misinformation that's going out there, and it's actually gives you the chance to give your 10 cents on these topics and put in. And one thing again I want to talk about is with your education, obviously through your Instagram and stuff, you're very, very big on kind of taking things that to a lot of people that are, you know, intermediate advanced trainers, they think, you know, these are the things that they should be doing, and you start to break them down and you start to make people think, you know, okay, well, why actually are you doing that? And one point that I really, really want to bring up, which is fantastic, is kind of you talking about stretching muscles versus strengthening muscles, or strengthening the joint and the supporting structure. And it's something that I think for the vast majority of people that are even quite heavily involved in training, it's something that they would never even think about. You know, we're taught when muscles are tight, we need to stretch them, that makes it better, this is good, and then we can go back and do all of those ridiculous things that we like to do to jack our bodies up and make them tight again. But the brilliant point you make, you know, if your psoas is tight and your hamstrings are tight, well, they both have agonistic and antagonistic effects on the hips. So how is this gonna work? So actually understanding and going, okay, well, maybe you need to be looking at this rather than this, I think is brilliant. So what other areas do you think people really need to be paying attention for with that practice of understanding strength, when to strengthen as opposed to when to stretch?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just, I guess, asking why something is tight, because, you know, we sort of think, oh, something's tight, we need to stretch it, something's weak, we need to strengthen it. But muscles don't just have actions, they also have functions. So, for example, yes, the psoas like flexes your hip, yes, the hamstring extends the hip, but also the psoas is a stabilizer of the lumbar spine. So if your lumbar spine is unstable, then the psoas is going to like spasm, quote unquote, to hold something together to give that perception of stability. And then, for example, like the hamstrings can also act as a pelvic stabilizer as well. So, you know, if you've got an unstable pelvis, then, you know, those hamstrings will like give that perception of tightness to sort of signal to you, you know, we're unstable here, we need something to sort of hold us together a little bit more. And I think it's also, you know, it's, if you're again going into that cycle of stretch, it's tight, stretch it, feels good for a bit, goes back tight again, stretch it, that cycle. It's like, well, we're not seeing any lasting changes, we're missing something here. So that's when you sort of start to think, you know, more of that stability sort of stuff, because people as well, you'll think, oh, it's tight, so it's weak, so I need to strengthen it. But it's sort of like, then people get into doing like the actions of strengthening things. For example, say your glutes is a common one that's weak. So people start to strengthen their glutes with the action of the glutes, and that's gonna make your glutes strong, yes, but the action of those glutes will, for example, like taking out the glute max, which is, you know, for hip extension. If you look at the med and the min, their role is actually to stabilize the pelvis during gait cycle. So when we're walking, rather than be strong. Like they don't really need to be strong. Like if you're a hypertrophy athlete, you're a bodybuilder or something like that, you want that to be big. You'll do the action to strengthen and build those glutes. But if you're not, if you're say a sprinter or something and you really need a stable pelvis, then that's when the language comes into being important, because you need to stabilize the pelvis, and doing a stability exercise is going to be different to a strength exercise. So strengthening, you're going to be action to insertion of the muscle, but stabilizing works that muscle in the way it's supposed to be worked, for example. So it's a different adaptation. Just like if you were to, if you wanted to squat the heaviest weight possible, running a marathon isn't going to transfer over to that. You need to be specific to the sport.
Yeah, it has to be relative. It has to be relative, 100%. And I think it's a really brilliant point that you bring up in terms of understanding how the muscle actually works, and what the action of it is, and kind of what the actual movement of it is. And that so many people, again, I even think up to a high level in terms of like athletes don't necessarily understand what their bodies should actually be doing and how their bodies should be handling those loads. So, like you said, you come into it. If I go back and I think now to all of the people that I have trained with or I've been around where, they'll do a squat and they're like, man, my hammies are so tight, my psoas is jacked up, and they're doing hammy and psoas like stretches in between sets for like the first 45 minutes. They come in like 3 days later to do another squat session and they're like, man, my psoas and hammies are so tight again. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, you've flogged this dead horse so many times now. Like, we need to think about something else here. And there must be so many people up and down the country that are just screaming in frustration that they keep on doing what they believe to be the right thing, but they're so close, but they're actually so far away because they're actually performing the movement rather than the joint action.
Yeah, I actually had a good example of this. Is I had a friend who, she was complaining for days. Her psoas was so tight, and she was like, someone just needs to release my psoas. I was working at a physio clinic at the time, and I think I'm not sure if it was like another massage therapist or another practitioner there, finally got in and released psoas, and then the next day she was like crippled over, walk back, had just like her back pain, she slipped a disc or something. Her back was just so bad she couldn't walk, because that was holding that lumbar spine together was like the tight psoas, and once she released that, it was like bam, like she wasn't able to do anything. So yeah, that's another example of like what can happen if you just sort of dig a little deeper.
Yeah, and if anyone's ever had their psoas released, it is absolutely fucking disgusting. It is a horrible, horrible sensation. So if anyone can avoid going through that,
I'm sure you've got like organs and other muscles and things on top of it before you actually get into the muscle deep down. So
yeah, it's a horrible area to get to. So
fun.
if we can avoid having to get in there and just actually giving people the corrective practices to stop ever getting to that point, trust me, people, listen, take note. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
saying that, not a sorry.
No, carry on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, in saying that, like there is a place for releasing and stretching as well. For example, like if someone does have like that restricted range of motion and they're unable to get into a good position to be able to stabilize that joint or that muscle, then yeah, that's a way in which we can work into that. But I'll always follow it up with something that's going to stabilize and hold it long term.
No, but I think that's a brilliant point, because again, I go back to not only athletes but general pop, and you think about people on a day-to-day basis, all of the varying different movement patterns they're having to do, the loading, the carrying, the sitting at desks, being in cars, standing up. it's all going to have huge, tremendous environmental factors on their bodies, where they hold tightness and tension, where maybe they have a reduced range of motion because this is tight, or maybe because this is being overworked so much during their work, they have that instability and that imbalance there. I think it's really important because I'm sure there will be lots of people that will listen that will go, okay, I have X, Y, and Z symptoms, but when I try and do the corrective principle A, nothing works. And again, it's kind of going back to that whole banging your head against a brick wall. It really, really batters you down. So when someone comes along and goes, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but actually, have you just tried this little difference? And then when someone picks that up and they go, oh shit, this is what I've been looking for all my life. It's like, okay, well actually, this is the thing. You're so close, but you could be so far at the same time.
Yeah, and it goes the other way as well. Whereas I've had actually, hypermobile patients and gymnasts and things like that have come to me and they said they're tight, and I go to check their range of motion, and their range of motion is fine or it's beyond normal, and it's like, well, why are you tight? Like your leg is up next to your ear. It's like, that's not tight, but it's that perception of tightness they have because they have that hypermobility, they have those unstable joints. So therefore, like the muscles that like they're wanting to create that perception of tightness because, they need protective mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because, again, I've spoken about it with a few strength coaches before, but we talk about lack of range of motion and kind of the various different issues that we have to suffer with that, but not a lot of people take it to the polar opposite flip side, and actually all of the issues that are presented when you're given a hypermobile client, because now everything is flipped on its head, and you really, really, really have to understand how that individual works, and you have to understand the individual's anatomy and their joint function to understand where they should safely be and where they should comfortably be, because where they're comfortable and where they're safe, I'm sure you'll agree, won't necessarily always be the same thing.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Like it likes to lie to you. Your body, you can't trust it. You just gotta...
Yeah, it's the whole thing of something might feel 100% right to you, but it's not until you get a pair of eyes from the outside, like a neutral perspective like yourself, where you can go, actually, you know what, that's not 100% right. We actually probably want to reduce that range just a little bit. We want to bring you out of the hole just a little bit more, and actually now all of a sudden your pelvis is aligned much better. You're able to hold that position with your spine better. Look at the angle at the knee, at the hip, everything just looks better. But yet for that individual, because they don't know any better, they've never been told, hey, why is your ass on the ground in the squat? Like, why are you down that low? Maybe actually you're going to find it being a little bit benefit up being just under 90. And I think that's something brilliant that I'm really glad that you brought up. When you're looking at hypermobile clients, what are kind of some of the key factors that you need to take into consideration with your key lifts? Are you kind of swapping out things like squats for leg presses, where we can kind of it's easier to reduce kind of the various different factors because of spinal loading, etc.? What are you doing anything differently? I mean, who knows? You might not be doing anything different.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it would be about the same, like creating awareness for those clients as well. So perhaps, while you do that in your first couple of blocks or couple of months or whatever, you're sort of getting into those movement patterns and sort of helping them feel where sort of more they should be before you start loading them under, more like less externally stabilized instruments, for example.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think in terms of kind of when we're looking at comparing the two between kind of males and females, obviously kind of coming back and summing it all up, there's a lot of differentiating factors, but I think the biggest key point that I've taken away from literally everything that we've said is that it is so much about the individual. That I think when anyone, client, coach, trainer, whatever it might be, when you take the time to invest in the individual is when you are going to get the best out of them. And I think you can probably completely agree with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
For
it's
sure.
beautiful. So I want to wrap this up the same way I wrap up every single podcast. It's very much a completely different tone question to the rest of the show. I want you for a second to take a step back in time. Okay, I want you to imagine that we're going into a time machine and you are going back to visit your younger self. I want you to imagine you're there with kind of yourself at kind of 10, 11, 12 years of age, you know, very, very impressionable. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You're able to spend a couple of minutes with your younger self, impart a bit of wisdom, knowledge, maybe a mantra to live your life by, some advice that's going to help that younger you get through all of the tasks that life has thrown at you since then and kind of help you to get from where you were then to where you are in your life now. I'm interested to understand, what would you give to your younger self?
Um, that's a really great question. Like my first instinct is to say like I wouldn't change anything because then I wouldn't be where I am now, because everything back then has sort of led to where I am now. And I think like the way I did things back when I was age was just so much different. But I guess it's given me even more drive to educate young women now, because you know it's sort of like I love to see them lifting weights and not doing the whole like cardio and restrict like diet thing. So, you know, maybe yeah, I probably wouldn't change that because it's helped me learn, and then I'm able to relate to those younger girls and like those up and coming generations as well. Um, but I think if I was to say anything, just you know, don't hold back. Like, don't hold back on anything. Don't think that like you're for example, you're not smart enough, or like you don't have enough experience to teach on this, or yeah, like nothing like that. I mean, like back when I've sort of come a bit full circle, I guess. Like back when I was 10, 11, I was like massive extrovert, loved the camera, like loved being center of attention. And sort of as I went through high school, I was sort of a bit like, okay, like maybe I shouldn't be like that. But now I'm sort of come full circle, and I'm a bit like, you know what? I don't really care. Like people are gonna like me, people aren't gonna like me. I'm just gonna do what I can and just share as much information I can and not hold anything back, because you know people need to hear this sort of stuff, and the people that have been doing that, like they're getting the information out. And yeah, I think that would probably be the big thing, is to, you know, not have fear around like being heard or whatever.
Yeah, I freaking love that. I think just having, especially as a younger adult, just the power, having a little bit of self belief and sticking to your guns has long term, I think, has such an incredibly profound effect. And you know, you're the first person to say it in the way that you've said it, but there have been many guests that have kind of reiterated very similar things. You know, sticking to your guns, understanding that, you know, if that's what you want to go and do, then actually fuck everyone else. If that's what brings you happiness and that's what brings you joy and that's what you want to do, then you should do that. And I can't think of a more perfect way to end the podcast. I want to take a second to thank you again for coming on board. It's been an absolute freaking pleasure. Like we said, we could probably spend 100 hours talking about everything. So it's really nice to kind of to get this one done. I would love to have you to come back again at some point. But thank you so much for coming on board. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Had a great time.
Yeah, it's been wicked. So I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.